Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us here on KXAN Live. I'm Will DuPree, coming to you from the KXAN Live studio. Hope you're enjoying your Friday afternoon. Let's take a live look right now in South Austin, where you can see clouds have moved in at this point. Temperatures out there, though, very hot, and they're only going to get warmer this weekend. So if you're wondering what the forecast foretells this weekend, we have forecast details over on our website, KXAN.com. But we also wanted to let you know about something that's going to happen after this weekend and get you ready for it. We're, of course, talking about the Texas primary runoffs. And early voting begins on Monday, runs through Friday, again for those primary runoffs. Election Day, in case you're wondering, is May 24th, so there's a little bit of a time to vote, but the last day to vote will be May 24th. Now, voters will decide which candidate will represent their party come November in a few local, state, and federal races. We do not have time to discuss all of those here in detail this afternoon, but let's highlight who has advanced to the statewide primary runoffs. On the Republican side, Republicans will vote for their nominee in 3 statewide races. Those are for Attorney General, Land Commissioner, and Railroad Commissioner. Meanwhile, the Democrats will choose their nominee in 4 statewide races for Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, Comptroller, and Land Commissioner. Now, we wanted to prepare you as you head into this weekend and share some information about what to expect when you head to the polls on Monday. So today, we are very fortunate to be joined by Samuel Taylor. He is with the Secretary of State's office. In fact, he is the Assistant Secretary of State for Communications here in Texas. Samuel, thank you for being here. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we've got so much to discuss, so I just want to get to a question that a lot of people out there have asked us about, and that's that, if people choose to vote this time, which primary will they be voting in on the Republican or Democratic side? Maybe let's start by discussing if they voted back in March during the primary.
That's right. So if you already participated in a primary this year back on March 1st, then you have to participate in the same party's primary in the runoff. So, for example, if you voted in the Republican primary, you can only vote in the Republican Party's primary runoff. Same with the Democratic side. Now, if you didn't vote in any of the primaries back in March, then you have a choice. You can vote in either the Republican or the Democratic primary runoff, and there's no prohibition against that, and you can vote in whichever party's primary runoff you want. Just understand that in the primary runoffs, those are only the top 2 candidates that advance to that final stage. So if no single candidate got more than 50% of the vote in the regular primary, they advance to the runoff. So the runoff is sort of like a lightning or a sudden death round for these candidates in terms of getting their name on the November general ballot. Just a reminder, if you did vote already in one of the primaries back in March, you're going to have to vote in that same party's primary runoff. If you didn't vote in the primary already, then you've got your pick of either the Republican or Democratic Party primary runoff.
Thank you for clarifying all of that. We really do appreciate that detail, and that's why we have you on today. I also wanted to ask you about vote by mail. So today, from what I understand, is the last day that you can submit an application to get a mail-in ballot, but there is an identification requirement for that too. Explain to people what they'll have to include if they apply to get that mail-in ballot.
Yep, that's correct. Today is the application for ballot by mail, or ABBM, deadline for the May 24th primary. So the thing is that most folks who vote by mail are over 65 or disabled, meaning they can check a box on that application saying that they want an annual ballot by mail, which means for every single election held this calendar year, they will automatically get a ballot by mail because they're over 65 or disabled. That means they're going to be qualified for, essentially the rest of time to get a ballot by mail. So the folks who have already applied for a ballot by mail, you're good to go. You will get one in the mail from your county's early voting clerk. Now, if you have not applied to vote by mail yet, today is that deadline to make sure and get that in to your county's early voting clerk. A lot of counties stay open a little bit later on days like this to make sure that they give ample time for folks who are trying to make it after work or who at the last minute decided that they're going to have to or they would prefer to vote by mail if they're qualified to do so. And an important change that that some folks experienced in the March 1st primary, but is now the law in Texas, is that you have to include an ID number on that application for ballot by mail. So it doesn't have to be multiple numbers. It can be either your Texas driver license / state ID number or the last 4 digits of your social security number. You don't have to put both, but if you have both and you want to put both, that's totally fine. There's nothing prohibiting you from doing that, as long as one of those numbers matches what's on your voter registration record. Your ABVM will be accepted and you will receive a ballot by mail for the May 24th primary runoff. Important for the May 24th primary runoff, you have to make sure and select which party's primary you're voting with so that your county knows which ballot to send to you. Otherwise, they're going to send it back to you and ask you to check which party's ballot that you want to receive.
How can people check to see which identification number that it's associated with their voter registration?
So that information is held by the counties. For the most part, you can go to votetexas.gov and click Update My Registration. On the voter registration section, it'll take you to texas.gov. And if you need to make any changes, your address or your name change, you can make it through that same portal. But what we would recommend doing is checking with the county and seeing if they can provide you that information as to which ID is on your voter registration record. The thing that I think most people don't realize that I want to make sure your viewers understand is that 95% of all registered voters in the state of Texas, so the vast majority, almost every single voter, has both identification numbers on their record. And the reason for that is because regardless of when you registered, if you registered 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or just 5 or a couple years ago, whenever you register to vote, if you only put one of those numbers on your voter registration application, we have an agreement with the Department of Public Safety so that if you only put the last 4 of your social, and they can pull in your driver's license number and add it to your record. Vice versa, if you only put your driver's license number, they can pull in the last 4 digits of your social and add it to your record. So we've got complete records with both numbers for the vast majority of Texas voters. So it's not a guessing game. It's not something that voters are going to have to worry about which number to put. If you're unsure about it, then go ahead and put both. That's what we recommend, and that's what counties recommend. So if you really want to check, you can check with your county, but I think the best thing to do in this case, if you're unsure about your voter registration record, is go ahead and put both numbers. And again, as long as one of those matches, then you're going to be good to go. You're going to get a ballot in the mail for that primary runoff election.
We just went into detail about applying for ballot by mail, but that same ID that you put on that application also must go on the ballot itself whenever you send that back in. Remind people about the rules regarding that.
Sure, and that's on the carrier envelope. So that's a really important one because we saw a lot of folks just simply forgot to include that number when they voted the primary, which resulted in the ballot rejections that I'm sure you were seeing headlines from in recent weeks. So the main thing there is that's the same exact rule applies. If you've got both numbers, you don't have to necessarily put the same number that you originally put on your application. As long as one of the numbers that you put on that carrier envelope matches, then your ballot by mail should be accepted. So it's in a different place on the carrier envelope. Basically, you will vote your ballot. You'll put it in what's called a ballot envelope, like a secrecy envelope, and then you'll put that envelope inside the carrier envelope, and that's the one that has the ID field under the flap. And the reason that it has to be under the flap is to protect that personal information. So I know, a lot of folks are concerned about having their personal information just flying out there in the mail somewhere, and people are concerned about identity theft. This protects that. Putting it under the flap makes sure that your personal identification isn't going to be openly exposed in the mail. So when you're putting that ballot inside the ballot carrier envelope, before you close that flap, you've got to make sure and provide one of those ID numbers in the space provided under the flap. And again, you can feel free to put both. It's no problem at all. And then you seal the flap on the back of the envelope, you sign it in the red box, and then you send that in to your county's early voting clerk.
You did mention there that a number of mail-in ballots were rejected because of the lack of the correct ID number associated with those mail-in ballots. How much work is the Secretary of State's office doing now to prepare voters for those different rules for this runoff election and then also in the November election?
Right. Yeah. No. It's absolutely a huge undertaking to make sure that all voters who are qualified to vote by mail understand that there's that new ID requirement. And just like it was with voter ID, presenting in-person voter ID when voting back in, I think the original law was passed back in 2013. It takes a couple of cycles for voters to get used to it. It takes a couple of elections. However, we're to the point now where voting in person, everybody understands the ID requirements really well, and we've had very few, if any, problems reported to us about in-person voting ID. Because this new ID requirement for voting by mail is new, we need to devote some extra time to educate voters on it. So we've been taking out radio ads, taking out digital ads, doing billboards, out-of-home ads. All across the state, we've been doing grassroots advertisements, and we're going to be increasing that more and more heading up to the November election, including going to places to meet people who most often use vote by mail, people who are in assisted living, people who are in senior centers, those folks who are 65 and older or disabled, again, make up the vast majority of people who vote by mail. So those kind of folks require different types of outreach in order to reach them and make sure that they're understanding these new requirements. But I think, once people understand it, once people are explained what the new ID requirement is, and, I think the big thing is that most people just didn't put any number in that field under the flap. So we've also added large red boxes around that field on the carrier envelope. So folks getting those going forward are going to be seeing that, draw attention to that ID field under the flap so that they don't miss it and they don't accidentally seal it before putting one of those ID numbers. So, we've taken a lot of steps to try to draw more attention to that requirement. Because the fact is, if somebody applied to vote by mail in the first place, they've already provided one of those numbers. So they are good to go. They should be able to vote by mail. It's just a matter of remembering to also put it under the flap on the carrier envelope before you seal, sign, and send that ballot in. So that's what we're out there educating people every day and trying to do more and more going to November to make sure that everybody who wants their ballot to count has a good understanding of those new ID requirements and is not intimidated by it and is not daunted by that new requirement, so they can be sure that their mail ballot is going to be counted and cast correctly.
What are you anticipating with the rejection rate for those mail-in ballots after what happened back in March this time?
We're already seeing them go down. We've heard, anecdotally from a couple of counties that the rates have gone down significantly since March. The counties have a lot more resources at their disposal to educate voters about this new requirement. So I think a lot of the local county election officials have been doing a great job, doing specific outreach to their voters, educating voters about this new requirement. And, from what they've told us, we don't have official numbers in yet because we're waiting for the final canvass and then the final vote reports to come into our office, which usually come in about, a month later. But once we get all those numbers, I think we're pretty confident that we're going to see those numbers go down significantly from the around 12% statewide that we saw in the March 1st primaries. And, with the May 7th election, we're going to see them go down. I think with the May 24th election, we're probably going to see them go down even further. And by the time we get to November, hopefully, likely, we'll be in a place where the rejection rate is comparable to what it's been in years past. Although, I will mention that this is the first year that we've had this new tool. It's really important. It's called the Ballot by Mail Tracker. Some counties implemented this in 2020, but this is the first time the legislature actually created a ballot by mail tracker that our office administrates. So the ballot by mail tracker allows folks who voted by mail to enter that information and go in and check to see the status of their application and their ballot. And a really great tool there is that If they, for example, if they forgot to include an ID number on their application or on the mail ballot carrier envelope, they can go in and certify that their numbers, our ID numbers are correct, and add or correct any missing or mismatched information on those ballot by mail materials so that their county can process it. So they don't have to get the ballot back in the mail. They don't have to, worry about, it going in late. They can go in and correct it online through that ballot by mail tracker. So that's another really important tool that we're trying to make sure voters understand, and that's available at votetexas.gov.
Another issue that seems to have popped up is a shortage of people to work at the polls. Here in Travis County alone, we checked earlier today, and the clerk's office told us that they had about 100 poll workers they still needed for the May 24th election day itself. So what concerns does the Secretary of State's office have about staffing at the polls?
Yeah, and I think that was an issue that we saw in March 1st in a lot of counties, not just Travis County, but a lot of counties reported that there were workers that had volunteered. And again, these are party primaries. So on election day, the parties are the ones running the election. I can't stress that enough. During the early voting period, it's the counties that staff the elections. And then on election day, they are party officials, party volunteers, representatives, who are the clerks and judges running those polling places. So it's really on the parties to make sure that they have enough volunteers in the queue to replace anybody who doesn't show up on election day. And one issue that we were hearing about is that a lot of counties thought they were sufficiently staffed to have enough party representatives on election day, but then 6 o'clock a.m. rolls around on Tuesday morning, election day, and the people who were supposed to be there were just no-shows. And so we don't want that to happen. We don't want people to be scrambling. Counties have done a great job of moving around personnel to make sure that all polling places are adequately staffed. But the best solution to that is, while we're in this early voting period next week, if you want to help your county out, you want to help your fellow voters out, you want to help your party out, whether you're in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, go volunteer and sign up to be a poll worker. We've got poll worker training online that anybody can take to get certified based on whatever election systems are in your county. Here in Travis County, I know they use ES&S equipment. Other counties have HART equipment, and so you'll get trained up on the specific equipment that your county uses so that you can be an informed poll worker and go in, and even if you're not necessarily on the front lines, you can sign up to be, a backup poll worker so that if there are people who are no-shows on election day, you're ready to go in there and help out and make sure that those polling places are fully staffed so that we don't have delays and we don't have closed polling locations and, some of the other issues that we saw on election day back in March. But I mean, it's just more of a call to action than ever before for folks to get involved in the election process. And I think, really, if I could add some commentary here,
Sure.
There's a lot of concern these days about election integrity. There's a lot of concern about, people not having trust in the results of the election, whether you think that there is voter suppression or that you think there is massive amounts of voter fraud. No matter what your perspective is, the best way for you to really understand how the process works is to become involved firsthand and get a firsthand look at the process. You'll realize that the people working these elections day in and day out, from the county clerk, the county EA, all the way down to the election clerks and the election judges at your polling place, they want to get the process right. They want to make sure that we have free and fair and open and accessible elections for everybody, no matter what party you're in. I think sometimes get lost in all of the political, exaggerations and histrionics that go on between the two parties. But, I think the best way for somebody who has concerns about the process, again, whether you're on the left or the right, is to get involved and see it firsthand and experience what it's like to work at a polling place firsthand. Because you'll see that these people really work hard to make sure that everything goes right, and that there are multiple layers of safeguards and backup procedures in case something goes wrong on election day.
Well, maybe that will inspire people to get out and get involved. Samuel Taylor, again with the Texas Secretary of State's office, thank you for taking time this afternoon and devoting so much of it to answering our questions and providing some information to people. We really do appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Y'all go out and vote early, starting on Monday.
All right, that's the message. Again, thank you, Sam. And for everybody who's watching our live stream, if you'd like to find out a little bit more and are seeking our voter guide to let you know about everything to prepare for Monday's early voting period for the May 24th primary runoffs, you can head to our website. Here's the story right there, the headlines voter guide, what you need to know ahead of the Texas primary runoffs. We have information about early voting polling sites, where you can vote on Election Day itself, and links to all of our counties in our viewing areas election pages, so you can go there, check out sample ballots, look at polling locations for those particular areas too, all in that one story. So it's a really good resource for people out there, so please check it out if you haven't done so already on KXAN.com. I'm Will DuPree again in the KXAN live studio. Thank you all for watching for as long as you have this afternoon. We really do appreciate it. Hope you enjoy your weekend. Stay cool out there, and happy voting on Monday. Take care.